Hello everybody, my name is Chase Bradshaw and I've had this John Deere 26G that you see right here on rent for about a week. I've run it for 6 days, Monday through Saturday. I had it on 4 different sites in those 6 days, doing mostly clearing and demo work with it. And today I wanted to talk about what I learned from that experience. This is not a review of this machine specifically. I already did one of those. If it's not out already, it will be out shortly. This is just talking about my experience having an excavator on rent for a week and running it as a solo owner-operator business owner at just 19 years old. So let's get into it. So I want to talk first about what I learned generally from having this machine, and then I'll talk about some specific learning experiences I had from each job. So what I learned generally from having this machine on rent is, number one, I'm definitely underbidding my jobs on how much I'm making off of them and how long I'm going to be there. I'm definitely underestimating that. I need to be charging more. I did make money this week, but I put in almost 70 hours this week and I did not make enough for the amount of hours I put in. So I do need to be charging more for this machine. Now, part of the reason that I did some of the jobs so cheap was a lot of it was for family. I had this machine at my house where I get to live rent-free for a day, and all I got paid for that was what it cost to have this machine on rent for a day. And then I did some work out here on my family farm with it, which I will make a profit off of, but, you know, family and friends discount. I won't make quite as much off it as my normal jobs. Now, the reason I rented this machine is actually for the only job that's not in this video series, which was stacking up a burn pile from a clearing job that I did back in February. So I did a clearing job and I was not able to burn the material when I did the job because it was too wet. And I tried to go out there and burn it last week and I was unsuccessful because I didn't have a machine to stack it and the pile was spread too thin. The fire just cut right through the middle and left me a pile on either side. So I had to get a machine out there to stack the pile up. Well, the problem I was running into was if I rented a machine for a day, I was going to lose money on that job because the cost to rent a machine just for a day like this, you're typically going to be looking at anywhere from $400 to $550 for the day. But you can rent one of these for a week for about $1,000 to $1,400, which means it's only costing you anywhere from $200 to $300 to have it on a job for a day if you're using it all week. So my thought process when I rented this was, I can rent it, do that job, still make a little bit. I didn't make enough on that one either. And then I'll get some other jobs for it. So I got the job at my house, which I did at cost, and then the work at the family farm. And I also had a clearing job that I did. And the problem I ran into with that one was I offered them a discounted rate to try and get the job because I had looked at it before, given them the price, and hadn't heard anything, and I really wanted to be able to have this machine for a week so I didn't lose money on my other job. And I didn't lose money on it, but I also didn't make anywhere near what I should have on that clearing job. So general lesson number one is that I need to be pricing these jobs higher for the amount of hours that I'm spending on them, because I put in at least 70 hours this week, every day except for, well, I won't say that. 3 or 4 days this week were 12 plus hour days. So lesson one, charge more for my time. Lesson number two, always expect the unexpected. Nothing went to plan this week at all. Monday went all right, but every other job, something did not go to plan. So now I'm going to get into a little bit the individual jobs, and that'll kind of bring us back to the idea that nothing ever goes to plan. So the first job that I did was at my house, and immediately that was not the plan. The plan originally was to do the clearing job Monday and Tuesday, stack the burn pile Wednesday, do the job out here on the family farm Thursday, and the job at the house I would do Friday if I couldn't get another job lined up for the week. But I wanted to get another paying job lined up for the week that would have made me more than just doing it at cost, and then I could have done the job at the house on Saturday because that one only took me a few hours, and I could have done that on top of my mow route that day. But the reason that that didn't end up happening was because Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and I should have looked at the weather forecast sooner. I looked at the weather forecast Sunday night and realized that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday were all going to be too windy to burn. So I ended up having to do the job at my house on Monday, which that one went mostly according to plan. The only thing that didn't go according to plan with that one was I didn't actually get started on it until 1 o'clock because I needed 2 trailers. I had to have one to get this machine here, and then I had to have my utility trailer to haul off all of the debris. And I didn't really count for how long that was going to take me, especially because this machine and the utility trailer were both 15 minutes from my house in opposite directions, and I was trying to do a lot of it during, rush hour morning traffic. So that job I didn't get started on until 1 o'clock, but that wasn't a huge problem because that was only a half-day job. I was done by 6 or 6:30, so that was only a 5 or 5.5 hour job. So that wasn't too bad. The only other thing that didn't go to plan with that one was my dad got on it and damaged the fence a little bit, but it wasn't anything major. Now, my dad did decide to be one of those customers where he kept adding things on while I was there. The plan originally with that job was just to tear down the treehouse and dig out the stump, and I ended up also cleaning out that flower bed that you guys saw. And what you didn't see was Tuesday morning before I left, he had me spread out some of that pile of dirt that I made so he could go ahead and start making a flower bed, or so we could do that. So there was some stuff added on there, which normally I would have charged more for that, but again, I live in the house rent-free, so that really was not a big deal. Tuesday, that's where things kind of started to go off the rails a little bit. So I didn't get started until about 11 o'clock in the morning Tuesday, because I had to do that extra stuff with the excavator at my house, and people kept coming over to talk to me and my dad, which happens when you're in business, and it's good to talk to people. But I didn't get started at the farm until 11, so when I was expecting to be done at 5 or 5:30, I wasn't actually done until 7:30. That was not the main thing that did not go to plan. The main thing that did not go to plan is something that you guys who have been following the series will know, which is that I dropped a tree on the fence and tore it up. I don't typically do tree dropping like that. I do land clearing, but I don't do tree work. But my Grammy asked me to drop those trees because they were in between 2 fences. So I went in there with my no chainsaw experience hardly at all and decided that I was going to drop that tree, or those trees. And what I ended up doing was I cut the trees too close to the fence to where when the tree toppled, it caught the fence on the way down and tore it in the gate up. So that was a big lesson learned, which is if you're trying to fell a tree over top of something, don't cut the tree just right above the top of it. If I had cut it about a foot higher, it would have just sailed over that fence and been fine. But I didn't want to leave too much of a stump. So I tore up that fence on Tuesday, and luckily that was on family land. I would have had to push my whole schedule back if I couldn't have dealt with that situation on Saturday, which I still haven't finished dealing with. We'll get to that in a minute. So that was a big lesson learned, was if you're felling a tree like that, cut it a little higher. And just generally speaking, I learned quite a bit about running a chainsaw from that experience. So now we'll get on to the clearing job, which I did Wednesday and Thursday. So that job, I just went in there to get out some scrub brush and open up the property. I suggested to the customer that that job should have been done with a skid steer, a brush mower, and a root rake. I could have been in and out of there a lot faster, and it would have left a much cleaner finish because they just wanted it opened up. That wasn't the final clearing. There'll still need to be some big trees dropped, and it'll eventually have to be root raked and graded out. So I tried to tell them it should have been done with a skid steer and a brush cutter. But I also told them I could do it cheaper with an excavator because it was cheaper to rent, even if I didn't have this on rent for a week, it was cheaper to rent this machine for 2 days than it was to rent a skid steer with a brush mower and a root rake for 1 day. And I don't own any equipment, for those of you who don't know. I own lawnmowers, but I don't own heavy equipment. So this wasn't the first time I had rented machines to do jobs, but this was the first time I had rented a machine for a whole week. So I offered to do it cheaper with this machine, only thinking about the rental costs and not thinking about the fact that it would end up taking about triple the amount of time with an excavator versus what it would have been with a skid steer and a brush mower. And I didn't bid correctly for my time. And then I came in and offered them a discount, where really if I had bid it correctly for the amount of time that job took me, it would have actually been cheaper to have it done with a skid steer, and I could have been in and out of there within a day. But the job did get done. But again, a lot of things did not go to plan on that job. So the neighbor who lived in the house next to the property was extremely talkative. On Wednesday, I lost over an hour and a half of production just talking. Which it did end up kind of working out because he did lend me a wrench. I didn't have a big enough wrench to tighten the fitting, and he lent me a wrench for that, which was nice. But I lost a lot of production talking to him on Wednesday. That's not a huge loss. Production Thursday, because he kept coming out and talking to me again. I didn't lose as much, probably only half an hour, 45 minutes. I lost over 2 with this machine when that hydraulic leak happened, and I had to take the machine and swap it for the one that you see here now. For those of you who saw that video, you know the machine I originally had sprung a leak, and they couldn't get a mechanic to me to fix it, so I had to take the machine back to the rental place and swap it. So I lost about 4 or 5 hours of production on that job between the hydraulic leak and the neighbor coming over to talk to me. And then another thing happened that I didn't bid for, which was how long it took to burn. So this wouldn't have been as much of a problem if it wasn't for the hydraulic leak. Because if it wasn't for the hydraulic leak, I would have been burning around 9 or 9:30 in the morning. Because of that hydraulic leak, and because I had to swap the machine out, you obviously can't burn with a machine that's leaking hydraulic fluid. So I didn't actually get started burning until 11 or 11:30. And I did not leave the site until 11 o'clock at night because that fire took so long to go out. And you're supposed to sit with a fire until it's done. I know a lot of people don't, and there are probably some situations where I wouldn't, but that fire was fairly close to some other structures, and it was in an extremely dry area with a lot of pine straw. So one ember gone wrong, and that whole place would have gone up in flames. So even though I was done with the machine work by 6:30 or 7, maybe 7:30 at the latest, I was on the job until 11, just waiting for that fire to go down until finally I felt it had burned enough that I decided to just go ahead and put it out, which was a nightmare in itself. The neighbor who took up all that time talking to me told me I could use his garden hose to put it out if I needed to, and then he left. But what he didn't tell me was the hose didn't actually breach. He just left a 5-gallon bucket out there. So I didn't have enough hose. I had to call somebody to bring me a hose to get it to reach the fire, and I just kind of had to carry 5-gallon buckets full of water over there for about 45 minutes just trying to get that fire out. So that's another thing learned is don't just bid for the machine work, bid for the time that you're going to have to sit there and watch that fire, because there's a good chance you're going to end up having to be there pretty late. Now, I'm not saying I should have bid the same price per hour for me to sit there and watch that fire that I should to be running the machine, because for the most part, I'm just sitting there on my phone, but that is time that I could have been home, spending time with my family, showering, sleeping, all that. So that was another lesson learned on that job. That one had a lot of lessons, a lot of things that did not go to plan, but shout out to General Rental for getting me swapped out with another machine. It's a smaller rental place, so I understand why they couldn't get me a mechanic. And I know a lot of other rental places wouldn't have been able to do that. I am very fond of General Rental, having rented from them. My problem with them is they just don't offer as wide a variety of machines and attachments as the bigger ones do. Like, the only specialized attachments they have are like a skid steer Harley rake, pallet forks, and I think they have a grapple for their skid steer. The biggest excavator they offer is a Kubota KX033, which I thought about renting, and I might do it next time. That would be right on the limit of what my truck could pull, but my dad's truck could pull it. So maybe next time I rent from them, that's what I'll get instead of the 2.5-ton machine. But General Rental is definitely a good one to rent from. And another thing that I really like about General Rental, sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but when you run into a good dealer or a good rental place or anything like that, it's always good to brag on them. The way they do it, if you go over their hour limit, which I didn't, but if you rent a machine for a week, you're typically going to have a 40-hour limit. And most places, if you hit 40.1 hours, you're getting charged for a whole nother day of use, even if you only went an hour over. General Rentals doesn't do it that way. Every hour over 40 hours, you're charged an extra $32 for, which if you're making $100 an hour running this machine, that's not bad at all. So as long as you're charging properly for it, you effectively have an unlimited hour rental when you rent one of these. You know, it's not like if you go an hour over, it's going to cost you an extra $250. It's going to cost you $32. Really like that General Rental does that. I just wish they had a little bit wider variety of equipment. So now let's move on to Friday. Now, Friday, I learned a little bit of a lesson in filming. And I kind of learned this lesson with the clearing job too. I wasn't able to film a lot Wednesday because I didn't move footage over to my computer like I should have. I just wasn't thinking about it, and my phone storage filled up. Well, Friday, I wasn't able to film at all because I filled up my phone storage again Thursday, and I got home at 11:30, almost midnight actually, Thursday night, so I didn't think to move the files from my phone. So I didn't have any space on my phone to record the job I did on Friday. But all I did Friday was I went and stacked up a burn pile from another job that I had done. So I learned Friday that I need to move my files from my phone to my computer or get an external hard drive for the phone until I have the budget as far as the YouTube stuff goes to get some better camera equipment. I'd really like to have an action camera that I could mount up on the machine and kind of have a view of the boom while I'm working. Because right now, my recording setup amounts to this cheap little clip-on mic right here, a tripod, which is what you guys are on right now, and my cell phone. That's all that I have for recording these videos. So I do need to upgrade my recording system a little bit if these videos start to do well enough. So that was a lesson learned on recording. Move your files over. And then there was Saturday. Saturday, I came back to the farm, and we decided we were just going to tear down the fence. As of time of recording this video, I still haven't patched the sections of fence that need to be patched because I tried to do that myself and learned it was not a one-man job. If your instinct says, this is not a one-man job, I need help, you're probably right. If you try to do it yourself, you're just going to waste a bunch of time, which is what I did Saturday night trying to get that fence fixed, and I eventually gave up on it. By the time you guys see this, you will have seen the video of day 6, and that will include fixing the fence, but at time of recording, I still have not fixed that, and I'm really glad I did that on family land, because I would have lost money at this point had that been something that I did on a customer's property. So it's really good to have a piece of family land out here to practice on, right? I mean, I can go in those woods behind there and just run my chainsaw all day and practice with it. And I don't do tree removal, I do land clearing, and I learned from dropping that tree on the fence and from trying to fix the fence, I do not need to be offering fence repair or tree removal to the public anytime soon. And that kind of circles back to nothing goes to plan. Obviously, nothing went to plan on any of these jobs, and I just need to get a little bit better at dealing with that because it was very frustrating having to work so many hours this week. And I did make a good amount of money. I made more than I would ever make in a week at my old job, but I worked a lot more hours too. So my hourly rate really wasn't that much better, which is not what you want when you've got the cost of that truck. You're putting more wear on it pulling this trailer, and you've got the rental cost and the fuel costs of the machine. So nothing goes to plan. Bid more for my jobs. Now I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about the machine. I already did an in-depth review on this specific model. I just want to talk about this size machine. So I rented a 2.5 ton Mini because I have a Ford F-150 to pull my equipment around with. And it has about a 10,000 pound towing capacity. This trailer weighs about 2,600 pounds empty. So the most I can comfortably put on it is 7,400 pounds. This is a 2.5 ton machine, but it's not actually 2.5 tons because 2.5 tons is 5,000 pounds and this is a 5,800 pound machine. They're usually a little more weight than what the model number suggests. So the most machine, as far as an excavator goes, that I can put on this trailer behind this truck is a 3 or maybe 3.5 ton machine if it's a true 3.5 ton machine and it doesn't actually weigh, 500 to 700 pounds more than that. So this is the most machine that I can comfortably get behind an F-150, and this is not a universally sized machine. When I was running this, I only ran this more than 8 hours for 2 days, and that was Wednesday and Thursday, and I had to fill it up multiple times in a day. This machine, on a full tank of fuel, you can only comfortably run it about 7 hours before you need to put some more fuel in it. So this machine is really not designed to be run 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And like I said, this is not a universally sized machine. This is a 2.5 ton excavator. It is not made to do everything. And I was doing mostly clearing and demo work with it, which takes a lot of power. Now, it's going to be a while before I buy a machine, but what I have learned from renting a 2.5 ton machine is that is not the size machine that I should buy. I think the first machine I will buy for this business will be a mini excavator. I'm a lot better with a skid steer, but it seems like there's a lot more demand in my area for owner-operators with mini excavators than for owner-operators with skid steers. So a mini X will probably be the first machine I buy for the business. But before I buy a mini X, I definitely need to upgrade to an F250 so I can pull a little bit of a bigger machine. Now, this is not the first time I've rented an excavator to do a project. This is the first time I've rented one for a whole week. But when I had my full-time job working for a civil contractor, I did 3 different weekend projects with mini excavators. I did a backyard drainage pipe install that I did with a 1.5 ton mini. I did a land clearing job where I had to go restack this pile with this machine. I did that with a 6 ton mini, and then I cleaned the ditches on this farm with a 9 ton mini. And when I was like 15, we borrowed a 5.5 ton Caterpillar mini to do some work around here and at my Grammy's house with. So I've rented / borrowed all the way from a 1.5 to a 9 ton. And when I worked for that civil contractor, I ran there a 3.5 ton all the way up to a 35 ton machine. So I've run a lot of different sizes. And I have definitely learned from renting this machine that I need to buy an F250 before I buy an excavator, because this truck cannot pull a universally sized excavator. If they had wanted the bigger trees down on that clearing job, I would have had to rent a bigger excavator for it, and I would have had to pay the delivery fee, and it would have cost more per day because I could have only had it there for 2 days. So I wouldn't have gotten the week rate. I wouldn't have been able to take it around and do other projects. Now, I can justify renting a bigger excavator for a week if I only need it in one place. But if I need it in 4 different places over the course of a week, I have to rent a smaller machine like this. So I do really need to get a bigger truck before I go buying an excavator, because that would open me up to rent bigger machines as well. So the 2.5 ton mini is not the universally sized machine. What do I think is the universal size machine from all the ones I've run? Well, it's definitely not the 1.5 ton mini. The 1.5 ton mini is a great machine for yard jobs, backyards, front yards, drainage pipes, that kind of thing. You could not clear or do demo work you couldn't do anything significant like that with a 1.5 ton mini. That's way smaller than the 2.5 ton mini and just way too small. I also don't think the 9 ton is the universally sized machine, because in order to tow a 9 ton, I would actually probably have to go up to an F350 and get a CDL. And so that just kind of leaves that 5.5 to 6 ton range that I've run. And I think somewhere in the 4.5 to 6 ton range would be the mini excavator that I would end up buying based on my experiences. Because I don't think, here's the thing about that size machine. I don't think that size machine was the ideal size for any job I've done, but it's the only machine that would have done every job I did. I could not have done the drainage pipe install or the job in my backyard with a 9 ton mini, and I couldn't have done the ditch cleaning job or that bigger clearing job with a 1.5 or a 2.5 ton mini. Now, I do think a 5.5 to 6 ton would have been a little big for the backyards, because the 2.5 and 1.5 ton machines were perfect for those. So those machines would have been a really tight squeeze. I probably would have had to do a little more damage to the flower beds, at least at my house. But those machines would have gotten into the backyard jobs, and they would have done the bigger clearing and ditch cleaning jobs. I think really, for every job I've done, either the 2.5 or the 9 ton one of those two was the ideal size, but the 5.5 to 6 ton would have done all of those. So I'd like to try out something in the 4.5 to 5 ton range to see if those are powerful enough to do some of the bigger work before I decide to buy one. I'm just trying equipment out right now. It may be that I don't even end up thinking I'm a good enough operator and that I need to go back to a company and learn a little bit more first. But I'm really hoping I can get out and do this on my own. The next thing that I buy will be a bigger truck so I can pull a little more machine, because right now, if I need an excavator bigger than 3 tons, I have to pay to have it delivered to the site, and either I'm paying day rates for it, which is cutting into my profits, versus if I'm paying a week rate, or I have to pay somebody to move it every single time I need it on another job, which is why I went with this size, because I could move it everywhere, and while it wasn't the perfect size, it did do everything I needed it to. But it wouldn't have done every project I've ever had. It would not have cleaned these ditches, and it would not have taken down those larger trees on the bigger clearing job I did. It did stack them, it would not have dropped them. So I do not think that this is the right size machine for me. I definitely need a bigger truck before I go buying an excavator. So I think that's about all I have for today. I learned a lot of lessons this week running this machine. I hope I get to do this again, both with an excavator, and I'd like to do it with a skid steer. Hopefully that'll be coming up soon. I have some stuff I'm trying to line up, so stay tuned for that. But that's all I have for today. Thank you guys for sticking with the series and for taking time to watch this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.